Okay, so we're going to start off with probably one of the most basic concepts in any programming language, and that's the idea of a variable. Okay, so what I think of variables as containers or references to data, right? So basically, some data can be stored inside of your memory, like in your RAM, that references something. So it could be simply like some numbers, some text, a video file, an audio file, whatever. And the variable allows you to reference that information to include it as input or output from processes. All right. So, for example, in this first block of code here, I've created a couple different variables. I have the variable x, and it's assigned a value 1. Y, it's assigned the string GIS, and a few other variables, as you can see. I'm also using the print statement here, and the print statement is used to print something, obviously. So if you're working at the console, you can print results to the console. Here in Jupyter Notebook, or in a notebook, we're going to print back to the notebook, so it'll be printed in line here. Okay, so if I run this line of code, and with the print, you can see that we printed those objects here as output. So this variable x is basically a reference to the data object here, 1, which is effectively just data stored in memory or stored in RAM. So a couple notes about working with variables in Python. Note to assign a variable, the most common variable assignment operation is done using the equal sign. So a single equal sign can be used to assign a variable to data to a variable. Right? There are some rules about variable names in Python, so I'm just going to add another block of code down here just to show you some names that aren't allowed. So for example, 1x would not be allowed. So if I try to run this, it'll give me a syntax error that says invalid syntax. Not a very useful error message. But the reason why this happened is because in Python, variable names cannot start, they can't start with a number. It has to be a letter. So 1x or x1 is fine, 1x is not fine. You can start with a underscore if you'd like, so something like underscore x would be a fine variable. Also, x underscore would be fine. So there are some rules. You can't start with a number. You can't use special characters. But that's and there can't be spaces in variable names. So, for example, x1, that won't work. Okay, so another common way people write variables out in Python is to use what's known as camel case. This isn't required, but it is like a common way people tend to write variables. So we could call this in like something like input image file or something. So note here it's 3 words ran together, and the subsequent words are like title case, so the first letter is capitalized, but the first letter of the first word is not capitalized. So again, that's known as camel case. You could also do something like this, underscores between the words, but that's a little longer. Again, it doesn't. Both of these would work. It's just preference. But camel case is a common way people write variable names in Python. Okay, so another thing you can do when you assign variables is you can, instead of assigning variables separately on a separate line of code, you can do it in one line. So here I'm creating 3 variables, x, x1, and underscore x, and I'm assigning these values to it, 1, 2, and 3, and then I print the results. This would be the same as doing x equals 1, and then on the next line, x1 equals 2, and then on the next line, less than or underscore x is equal to 3. This is just a little shorter, a little more concise. And so you get those print there. Note if we gave it, for example, something like a longer set of values than we had variable names, it's going to give an error. It says too many values to unpack. So to fix that, we'd have to add in more variables. So something like y and like underscore y. And then we have the same number of variables as we do the data that we're assigning to them, right? Another quick note, just when you're working in like an IDE, a development environment, you do have some tools available for seeing what variables currently exist in your space. So up here, if we click on variables, down here you can see a list of the current variables that I have that I'm using. we won't really worry about that too much. I just wanted to note that exists. Okay, so again, generally we use the equal sign for variable assignment, but there are other options. So one other option is we can do like in place addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, so on and so forth. So real quick, before we get into that, let me just show you how another way you would accomplish the same task before I show you this example. So if I did something like x is equal to 4, and then I could do y is equal to x plus 6, and then print y. And that obviously results in 10. So note here, I create a new variable y by adding something to the variable x. But instead of creating a new variable, I could manipulate the x variable in place. So this next set of code shows some of those examples, or shows that in practice. So here's our standard. So we're creating a variable x2, and then here we're adding to it 3. And then subtracting 3 from it, multiplying it by 3, dividing it by 3, and then exponentiation, so 2 to the third power. So let me print those out. So you can see what happens here is each time we run one of these, so each time we run one of these iterations, we're recreating the variable x, and then we're doing something to it, and we're saving it back to x. So this is again saving it in place. Let's just look at this as another. I'm just gonna add another code block here. So again, let's do x is equal to 2, and then we'll do x plus equals, I don't know, let's do 8. And then we'll just print x when we're done. Okay, so as you see here, x is now 10, so we're just adding 10 to it in place as opposed to saving the result to a new variable. Here's subtracting, -6, multiply, 16, divide, 2, 5. There's also floor division, rounds down, so rounds down to the whole number, so 0. Again, exponentiation. What else did we not do? I guess modulus. Modulus is remainder after division. So, for example, if we did like 10, and then we did modulus equals there, we end up with 2. So 10 divided by 8, 8 goes into 10 one time with a remainder of 2, so modulus returns the remainder after division, right? So that we don't tend to use those types of variable assignments as often, but that is another way to assign variables if you want to say back to the same variable as opposed to creating a new variable as a result of the arithmetic.